quote of an unexamined life is not one worth living. And I think that it's worth us taking time out every now and then just to think about where we are going and what, you know, what we get out of bed for in the morning, what makes us incredibly happy in terms of both personal and professional development, and, you know, where we want to go, what we want to do with our personal and professional lives. And this is particularly important in terms for a fellowship and in terms of any fellowship application, but I'll talk specifically about the NIHR Fellowship application, given that because of the BRC, it's an NIHR funded opportunity, and because we do a lot of NIHR activity, that this is something that a number of you should be looking at. And when we're talking about what's included in an NIHR fellowship, it's equally weighted amongst 4 different parts. So there's the project, which people tend to spend their whole time thinking about, but that's only worth 25% of the application. The other elements are the place. So both the organisation, your supervision teams, your mentors, your collaborators, the person, that's you, in terms of your trajectory, in terms of where you're going, and importantly, training. And one of the really frustrating things that that I find is that when people come to me for advice about their fellowship application, the training is actually left until the last minute. And when you think about it, because this is absolutely an investment in you, they're looking at you having an ambitious training and very thoughtful training program. And let's face it, it's one of the only times in your career that you're going to get paid to undertake training. And so making the most of those opportunities is absolutely key. So one of the first steps in doing a training plan is really understanding where we're at and what skill set that we have at the moment. And so when we talk about undertaking a personal inventory, I think this is a really important step to understand what our skill set are. And often when we do this, it's kind of a bit like navigating the Tokyo Underground, which is what this picture represents. And that we don't know where to start. And so what today's presentation is kind of giving you a few tools about putting some structure around, what your personal inventory is, where you want to go and how to get there. So if we have a look at developing a personal and professional development plan, this is something that we particularly use. We use across anyone who's going for fellowship applications, but find it also particularly important in terms of postdoc development and where you want to go past, because often a PhD application kind of has a distinct journey in itself. But I do truly believe that you should be doing this kind of for any fellowship application. But it's the kind of thing that I do every now and then, just to kind of keep a sense check of where it is that I want to go and why am I here on a Monday night at 7 o'clock talking to people when who are obviously or maybe hungry and tired, and why am I doing this? And I do it because it's really important to me, and so it's kind of, I think it's important that we do have this kind of sense check every now and then in our career. And so I think a really important thing to start with, which is it's around what are the important goals I want to achieve, and having those as things that are both objective and quantifiable. Being the best person I can be, for example, is not particularly helpful. If we're talking about I wanted to be known as kind of a research leader in scleroderma research, by X time, so it needs to be kind of much more specific. And a leader is defined as someone who has what? PhD, has grant income, is nationally known. So understanding what goals you want to achieve. And then also understanding which of these are the most important to you. And this is the kind of things that really you do because you want to do, and they're why you get out of bed. I've had a career, so I've always had this interest in developing research capacity amongst other people, and I've always done it, and I have spent most of my academic career not being paid to do it, but I just did it because it's important, and now I get paid to do it. And so I think that these are the kind of things, when you're talking about your goals, you know, they're crucial to understand. How long will it take to achieve these goals? And I guess the questions around that is, if you're not going to be 100% committed to one of these goals, you have to ask yourself about, well, why? If not, why not? And is it kind of a goal that's important to me? And I always think that you should think about how you're going to reward yourself, or how you're going to know when you've actually achieved that goal. I'm a big one for rewarding yourselves. Personal and professional development plan also focuses on who you are. So what you're interested in, what are the things that inspire you, what are the things that challenges you, what are your values? You know, is it important for you to have a good work-life balance? Is it important for you to be financially secure? Is it important to have flexibility in your work? And you should be thinking about these things. What are your values that are important now and in the future? And absolutely knowing and understanding your personal strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And I would strongly encourage you to get feedback from other people. And doing things like 360-degree review can be incredibly empowering in terms of identifying, you know, some of the things that you're good at and some of the unseen weaknesses. I think we're often very good at talking about our weaknesses rather than celebrating our strengths, and this is a good way of doing that. You also should be looking at what's my current standing in my and what's my potential within my chosen field. So where am I in terms of my professional development? Where do I want to be? What about within my organisation? Because you really need to look at aligning your goals so that if they're going to be supported by your organisation, so that they fit in with their strategic plan, and so that you're able to work together with your organisation. I always think it's a good litmus test to see that if your goals don't necessarily fit in with your organisations, it's possibly a good time to have a think about where you're, whether or not you should be within that organisation. Then it's around identifying development needs and opportunities. And I think one of the things you need to be a bit strict with yourself is, what are the things that you can give up, or what are the things that you simply can't stop doing, and identifying these so that you're clear, I guess, in your own mind about the things that you have to do in order to kind of fulfill your current job criteria. But what are the things that I think you often fool yourself into thinking that you have to do, and you often get caught in, you know, going kind of down rabbit holes when you're just, again, doing things for the sake of doing them. And then it's identifying which skills, knowledge and outputs, what are the things that are going to help as I progress and as I want to develop. And I guess it's also around how others perceive us, and whether or not there's kind of opportunities to take on roles or responsibilities within your organisation that allows people to see you in a different light. And this can be incredibly important in terms of professional development, but also academic development. And I guess that networking outside of the people that you know can be incredibly empowering in terms of your personal development and just linking in with other like-minded people. The next thing is clearly to formulate a plan, and the plan should be should be short, medium and long term. Often when you sit down, particularly with academics, and say, look, where do you want to be in 10 years' time? They all say, I want to be a professor. But when you kind of try and say, okay, well, what do you want to do in 12 months' time? It becomes much more ethereal. They just can't kind of do that. So I think it's always good to have long-term plans, but they need to be actionable in the short term. And you need to kind of look at, well, what are the things that that would really challenge or stretch me and take me out of my comfort zone in order to acquire some different opportunities and skills. And then it's around smart planning, so actions that you need to take. And for smart planning, there's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timely. And this is incredibly important because if you don't have smart actions, you're just going to have a list of things that never actually happens. So you need to be able to look at what's immediate priorities versus what's urgent priorities versus what are long-term priorities. And I think what we often can do is just start doing the urgent priorities rather than the important priorities. So by having those smart actions, that helps to get around that. And then it's identifying who can help me, both individually, who are the people who may be able to suggest things that I should do or to help, but also collective. And I'm kind of hoping that this, the research series, the fact that you have you know, tuned into this seminar series, and you're part of a network that, you know, those kind of collective cohorts can really help support and provide a different perspective in terms of personal and professional development. And then it's absolutely around doing it. It's around planning the action, making sure that you progress, you're actually recording what you're doing, because it's very easy to forget the things that you've done. And importantly, not everything's going to work. So identifying what has worked well and identifying the areas where that didn't work so well, that you came across some roadblocks. And again, importantly, it's around, you know, lifting as you climb. It's around sharing your experiences. So what again worked with you versus you know, what you found difficult, because, so, you know, again, in order to help other people on this way. And then absolutely evaluate and review. Again, if you kind of haven't done this in a structured way, you'll just end up with a list that you won't actually achieve. But what are the things that you wanted to do but you couldn't do, and why was this? And you know, really, you know, having kind of a substantial reflection about why you weren't able to do them. And I think often when we go and do training, or we go and do some kind of have an experience, that we learn things that we didn't expect to do, that we would learn. And so it's important kind of to look at, you know, well, what are the things are you able to do better? And also to reflect that if you've lost anything, one of the key things that we have with a lot of our clinical disciplines, such as they're called craft disciplines, including surgery, is that if they take full time out to do their to do research, for example, there's a real concern that they lose that dexterity, you know, those fine motor skills that are essential for them in terms to be a competent surgeon. And then as you progressed, have things changed? Would you do it again? Yes or no? You know, have you been introduced to new opportunities, and would you like to kind of have that as being something different? And then again, going back and what's the next step? So one of the common questions that we get asked, but I don't know what I need to do in terms of being a researcher. And we often get this, particularly those people coming from a clinical background, and it's like, I know what it means to be a good clinician, but I have no idea what it means to be the skills I need to be a good researcher. And the other area that we have is it's often quite difficult for established clinicians, and we see these particularly amongst the nursing and health professionals, pharmacists, allied health professionals, the healthcare scientists, is that they'll be very experienced clinicians, but they're very inexperienced researchers, and that's often difficult for them to come to terms with, that they will be up towards, you know, leading the field clinically, but as a researcher, they're right back at the beginning. And so this is where this document becomes incredibly useful. So this is the Vitae Researcher Competency Framework, and it should be Competency Framework. So I'm going to try and link to the website and see if that happens. Can you see me going to the website? Sarah. So I'm going to hope that you have. So this is the website, and you just put it in Google, and you can download a copy of the Researcher Development Framework. And
that's not happening, Anne-Maree.
It's not.
I
Okay.
can't see it.
No worries. Let me go back. So anyway, if you go to the website, just download the Researcher Development Framework, and it's this lovely document that's been developed by the Vitae group, and it's been developed for all researchers. So this isn't just for clinical researchers, and it's by no means perfect, but what it does is it provides a framework for the kind of competencies we would expect researchers to demonstrate. And this is kind of at the heart of it. And I'll go through each of these, each of the quadrants, but what they've done is they've developed these quadrants to say, look, to be an experienced researcher, or to be a competent researcher, you need to have knowledge and intellectual abilities, you need to have engagement, influence and impact, you need to have research governance and organisation, and personal effectiveness. And then they go into details about different levels of competency depending on your seniority. And the really important, so when we're talking about developing a training plan, that people, tend to focus on knowledge and research governance. Okay, do I know how to do a regression analysis, and how do I put my ethics application in? But if you think about the really important, like really impressive researchers that you know, it's often the engagement and the personal effectiveness are the things that they excel at. And the more senior that you get, the more the engagement, the personal effectiveness becomes important. So if we just look at these quadrants, so with research governance and organisation, within the document, this is just the high level activity, but they give you details and examples of where you might want training in each of these areas. And this is where your personal inventory comes in particular help. Because if you've done other things, you may have had experience, particularly in terms of some of the engagement and personal effectiveness. And it kind of gives you an idea of these are the kind of things that I need to undertake in terms of my my research. So I strongly suggest that you go through this and identify what are the skills that you have and what are the skills that you need. And as I said, these are the ones that people often forget about, and it's the engagement, the influence and impact and the personal effectiveness. And these are absolutely critical in terms of not just doing a research, but developing as a researcher, and particularly developing as a PI, developing as a senior researcher. Now, in terms of a fellowship, so these are things that I think you should check in every now and then if you're a clinical academic or an academic, to see what are my skill level in each of these. Are there other things that I need to be working on? But in terms of fellowship, what you absolutely do is you need to have a think about in terms of that that competency framework. It's like, what do you need in order of the training, personal development, leadership development skills in order for you to complete your fellowship, and that's really important because that's around diminishing the risk of you not being able to deliver it. If, for example, that you need to know about structural equation modelling, but you're not having any training on it, you're just going to spend hours trying to catch up. So that's all around risk. But importantly, it's around, because a fellowship is a significant investment, whether or not you're talking about a British Heart Foundation fellowship versus arthritis or an NIHR, they're a substantial investment. And they're an investment in you, and they absolutely want to make sure that your personal development is around you becoming a research leader of the future. They don't want to invest in people who are just going to treat this as almost like a project. So it's incredibly important that in terms of fellowship, you are looking at not just what you need to complete the actual fellowship, but it's about you being one of the leaders of the future and being ambitious and bold in terms of your fellowship. Several years ago, we had feedback that our fellowship applications were boring and were predictable, and so we've certainly learnt from that, and I think it's a really important part that you are ambitious. And then there's around finding the opportunities, appropriate training opportunities, and where to go for them. And you absolutely should look at what's available locally. So in terms, I'll just talk about the University of Leeds offer. So the University of Leeds has an organisational development and professional learning organisation, which is a very good, offers a number of different courses, and there are courses around knowledge, there are courses around personal development, engagement, resilience training, conflict resolution, statistics. So there's a whole lot of different things that are there. And this is available to University of Leeds staff and postgraduate students. And this will be the same. I know we've got some people from Bradford. University of Bradford will have something similar. If we're looking at the trust, organisational learning in the trust also have some incredibly good personal development opportunities. And the good thing for these are that these are genuinely where a member of staff that they'll be generally free to us. So this is just something that's always worth checking out what's there. And organisational professional learning comes from, you can do a course search and, finding out kind of what's available, and, there are hundreds of different offers. Now, the organisational development professional learning is a very good resource, but there's nothing gets around asking other people. So particularly finding out from other people around what's worked and what hasn't. So talk to people, obviously talk to peers who have been, or talk to those people who might be just a little bit ahead of you. But if you're looking to get advice around, say, a clinical trials course, then you should be talking to a trialist, not a rheumatologist necessarily, although I know a lot of rheumatologists have really good clinical trials experience. But you really want to be talking to people who know about the different areas that you're looking at. And also what works. So Claire Brockett, who isn't on this screen, I'm ashamed to say, went and did a public influence course that just looked great on paper and just wasn't particularly good in its delivery. So talk to your supervisors, talk to your peers, talk to those who've done the courses, talk to the experts so that you get an idea of where you should be going. The other thing is, in terms of fellowships, what they're looking at is, they are expecting, if you're doing a fellowship here at Leeds, they are expecting you are going to access all of those Leeds courses. That's what doing a PhD or a postgraduate qualification, that's just part of the offer. It's a Russell Group university. You will be getting a very good PhD experience. But for a fellowship, they're absolutely looking for you to look outside of your local offer, and they will fund you to go on the best courses. And for both pre-doctoral and doctoral, they are and advanced fellowship, postdoctoral, they will look at where the best courses are in the UK. For the more advanced fellowships, they also would be likely to look at what are the best courses internationally. So be ambitious, go to the places that have, the learning, and even if probably the best course that you can do is here in Leeds, look at doing other courses as well, because what there's a concern is if you're just taking the Leeds option, you're not being ambitious and you're just being lazy, and you're going to get that anyway. So have a look around. Also with fellowships, you need to make sure that your training needs and what your personal development is, that's going to be balanced with the rest of your commitments. So if you're doing a fellowship, you're likely to be doing, you may be doing some clinical work, but you're likely to be focusing on a fairly ambitious program of research. If you're doing a doctoral fellowship, you have a number of different commitments in terms of delivering on the doctoral fellowship, on delivering on your PhD. And so your training needs to be balanced with the rest of the commitments, and a good way of doing that is to use the personal inventory, use the Vitae competency framework, and then I'll talk about in a moment to make sure that the timing of these is going to be appropriate to the delivery of your fellowship. Some fellowships also will allow you to do some clinical training that may not necessarily be related to your project, and so this in the integrated clinical academic pathways, we've had a number of people who want to perhaps do something that will enhance their ability to be a good clinician. So a lot of our guys do prescribing courses or ultrasound courses, and again with the aim of that in terms they'll be developing clinically as well as developing academically. As I said before, be ambitious and be creative. You're going to get a good PhD offering if you're coming to somewhere like Leeds. What are the things that are going to make you different and going to be, going to make you that researcher of the future? And this is really important, as I was saying, in terms of more senior fellowship. So they're looking at things around you becoming an independent PI. There's what we like to talk about is team science, and that when you're a PI, you're actually bringing together several different teams and making sure that each of the team members feel part of the team and are valued and rewarded appropriately. And that really is where things like leadership skills become important, negotiation skills, resolving conflict, fighting over, the kind of, I still get quite astounded at the whole publication list for very, very senior people, how important it is where their name comes. But that's the reality, that that research can be a very confrontational, adversarial almost activity, and it's really important in terms of not losing kind of our, that we should be having a culture of positive behaviour. And absolutely developing those skills to be able to collaborate and to be able to be part of a team in an appropriate way. And I think they're things that really you should be considering at the advanced level. As I was saying, in terms of the timing, so that's not just the burden of training, but it's also when you're doing your training. A Gantt chart is going to be your best friend, because a Gantt chart will look at when you're heavily loaded with other activities. So if you're looking at doing kind of a huge amount of patient recruitment in October 2022, that wouldn't be the time for you to go off to do a randomised controlled trial course as well. It would also be important for you, if you're going to do your analysis, say an analysis as just a logistic regression course, that you might do an introduction course early on, but then you do an advanced course when you've actually got the data. And so the Gantt chart will be good at kind of giving you the just not just the content, but also the the timing of it, so that it's appropriate. And also obviously cost, and the whole, is it worth it, is important. But as I said, particularly the NIHR fellowships, they're investing in you, and as long as it's reasonable and it's well justified. And how you do that is that's based on this is where I come from. I have this skill set. I have, this is my background. This is where I'm going. This is what I need to have investment in, and this is what it will look like in the long term. So that's kind of basically it's a way of giving you a structured approach to developing a training strategy and a training plan. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much for that amazing course, amazing lecture. I think we had a raised hand from somebody who has now put down his hand, I think. And we also have a message in the chat from Marcus Tiger. I apologise, Marcus, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. And I'll read this to you. Professor Keenen, you have mentioned training courses a lot. Do you think that time collaborating with non-local colleagues can also be put under the training banner? It feels like it might help develop the soft skills and allow scientific development. Absolutely. So collaborations are key. Importantly, in terms of a training plan, though, they're different. So collaborations are absolutely expected in terms of fellowship application. The earlier on in your fellowship, in your career, your collaborations are expected to be within and outside your research, your institution or group. And that's different to kind of having collaborations that will help do a lot of personal development. So when you're putting in a fellowship, you need to really make clear what the expectation is of your collaboration in terms of training and development. Certainly the more senior that you get, the expectation is that, so an early postdoc or even a doctoral, but certainly absolutely critical for early postdoc is that the collaborations are outside of their organisation. There's one of the things that you need to make sure that when you're going for an early postdoc, and particularly if you're staying in the same institution, that you're being developed as an independent researcher, and that you're not just a glorified research assistant for your PhD supervisors. And a way of doing that is kind of having those collaborations and developing your own network of people. But absolutely, collaborations as part of a training plan, when you can say, I will be working with these people and these are the type of things that I'm going to get out, are incredibly important. Would visiting other research centres? Absolutely. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my chat up. All right, so developing other research centres is a logical thing, and I think you also need to make sure that it's not a jolly. Like I love going, love to kind of have us collaborate at La Trobe University in Melbourne and go back and visit them frequently. And there are a couple of things that I could potentially collaborate with them on, but it needs to be a this is why I'm collaborating with this particular group. And it's also, I think, particularly in terms of you're developing the independence, seeing how other people do it is incredibly important. We are going to do a session on mentorship, and I have some quite strong views about mentorship. And there's all, that you will get academic mentorship from your PhD supervisors, but it's always a good thing to have someone who's completely independent to your academic activities. And I always think that it's useful to have someone who just has your interests at heart. And they're the kind of people that could tap you on the shoulder and say, are you sure Leeds is the right place for you to be? Of course, I hope that that's the case, but, I think it's just part of learning to see what else is out there, making sure that you're in the right place, that's actually going to be the most supportful place for you. Can I ask a question as well? Could I? I think there might be there's another question. I'll let Caroline Young's question come first. She says, some skills be very broad and complex, such as statistics and bioinformatics. What's the balance between learning these skills ourselves versus collaborating with people that are expert in those skills?
That is absolutely tied back to where you want to go. So we have a lot of people who say if you want to be a professor of interventional cardiac rehabilitation, so you know that's that's what your driving skill is. So clearly you need to have a knowledge of things like health economics, of trial design, of analysis of recruitment strategies. But whether or not that's what you need to have detailed skills in, or whether or not you need to have the conversation, you know, have that high level without the detailed knowledge, that, you know, really depends on where you're going. So if, for example, you want to be known for you know, big data analysis, you are going to have to invest in some, you know, very specific research skills. And this is why identifying where you want to go is just as important as where you are now, because that should make that, you know, that decision a lot clearer. You know, and that's again for any level of fellowship, you can develop your own skills. Or you can buy in skills. So, for example, if randomised controlled trial is kind of the easiest one, there is no way that in, say, a PhD, not that you often do a randomised controlled trial in a PhD, but if you did a feasibility study, there's no way that you're going to have the time to do your health economics training, to be an expert in health economics, your trial design in order to be a trialist. And so this is where, you know, you have that balance. So I hope that kind of helps. Oliver's just asked, what do I recommend if the goal is also to teach the medical school? So absolutely. So I've focused on being a clinical academic, but if you're going to be an academic, there's certain skill sets that you will need to develop in terms of what is important in terms of the undergraduate curriculum. And there's a qualification around teaching, which has a number of different. It's a formal qualification that's around your development as a teacher, and I can't remember the name of it because it's not my area of expertise. But they're the kind of things that you need to have a talk to someone who's involved in teaching. And again, it's the same principles that are involved. I think someone's got their hand up.
I think it's Marcus put his hand up. I don't know. Marcus, did you put your hand up accidentally or?
No, I thought rather than type, I'd actually ask, make a nice change.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to ask, in terms of the CDRFs, they obviously expect clinical development and research, but it seems like the split, at least in terms of CDRF, is mainly on developing your clinical academic skill set in terms of being a researcher. So would you expect the training plan to be biased towards your skills as a researcher, or okay?
Yes, the reason for that is that most of the time, if you're doing a CDRF, and for those people that don't know what a CDRF, it's a clinical doctoral research fellowship, and it's so it's for those people who are established, well, who are clinicians that have been registered and working for at least 2 years. So it's expected that you're going to have reasonable development in those clinical skills, and that your research question should logically be in an area that you have clinical skills and that you've been working in. It's a bit hard if you say wanted to do cardiology research, but your work was in kind of rheumatology. That, you know, you'd need to kind of have a think about that. And we know that we have a number of people who are very, very senior, very established clinicians. And it's usually, like, you don't go into a lot of our professions to become a researcher in terms of the non-medical professions. You do them because you want to become a healthcare professional. So often they're a little bit further along in terms of clinic by the time they get research, those research skills. However, if you're relatively early on in your clinical career, and we've got a couple of people who have, you know, that aren't that experienced, then again, putting in some work around that whole process around developing their clinical skills. And again, it goes back to not just delivering on your fellowship, but where you want to be in a couple of years, as long as you can justify it, and as long as you've got those assurances around being able to deliver on your fellowship, but develop as a researcher. I think, you know, it's around justifying why you're doing what you want to do, you know, what you're suggesting to do. Does that make sense, Marcus?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? You can either raise your hand or you can put something in the chat. It's totally up to you. All right, well, maybe I can ask my question. Can I ask my question? My question is, it seems easy to locate the specific knowledge training courses, but how does someone go about finding training courses for those soft skills? So the leadership, the negotiation, the developing independence, where do they go to get those, particularly if they're in the postdoc period and they really want to develop themselves as a senior academic?
Yeah, so there's a number of great leadership courses around. The NIHR Academy have around 9 different leadership courses, and we've had a number of people who go on them that are excellent. You know, and they are tailored for different groups, and they have different levels of expectation. So you know, that's one area, and that's absolutely for people who are going to have either an NHS or a joint NHS university role, although the leadership skills are reasonably transferable. Then there are a number of leadership courses that are available in terms of a program called Aspire. There's a number of ones that are for specific groups around female leaders, around leadership and kind of mentorship around people from Black community. So I think the best way is actually to talk to some of the people who have done those courses. Talk to HR. Your HR department will have an idea of the different courses that are available. And just find out. So it's often, you know, worth, you know, having a mentor who is that. I'm a firm believer in having senior mentors who perhaps can signpost you to different opportunities that you may not necessarily be able to look at. But also, I didn't get that. Oh, could you try again? That's my Siri. But also for peer. Talking with you. Good. So for peer researchers, that's also, or you know, just finding out other people who've been and done that in that kind of a similar place. There's places like Ashridge, which are incredibly expensive but really intense live-in courses that, you know, you can do over 12 months. So it's just kind of a matter of kind of talking to people who've done that, and particularly HR are incredibly useful in this kind of signposting.
Grace, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm logged on as my daughter. It's Sue, actually.
Oh, how you doing?
Yeah, sorry. My daughter uses my phone all the time for college, so I'm logged on as Sue. Unfortunately, I don't know how to change it. Yeah, I just wanted to ask with the exam. I'm just coming to the end of my doctoral fellowship, and I just wondered, with the view for like advanced fellowship, how much training? Because I know it's quite. They like to see quite a good training package on your doctoral fellowship. How much is expected on an advanced fellowship?
About the same proportion. It's 25% of your weighting, and if anything, the more senior that you get, the more of the you know, the personal development is required, and that won't just be training courses. It will be around, you know, some of the leadership roles. So not just leadership, you know, learning, but also doing. And when you look at the research profs, which are the kind of the top of the fellowship tree, they're expected to have, you know, still a considerable amount of that personal development, leadership, research capacity building, so bringing other people along. So it kind of changes, you know, the more senior that you get. But I would strongly suggest that Sue, going from a
a doctoral to an early advanced fellowship or a clinical lectureship, it's around about the same balance in terms of the project, working on the project versus working on personal development.
Thank you.
Right, well, we've had a very engaging session, talk all evening, but I think we should probably wrap up here. So I'd like to finish by thanking Professor Keenan for her excellent talk and brilliant interactive questions.